see the tanks coming in and out, hearing airstrikes, I feel like I am once again visiting Auschwitz.
Passing a joint resolution to block these cells will make clear to the Netanyahu government that they cannot continue to ignore the U.S. government's demands for an immediate ceasefire and the release of the hostages.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. On the program today, the pager explosions in Lebanon, Senator Bernie Sanders' announcement, and Biden's hypocrisy about Ukrainians. Let me start by reading from these quotes. The mass explosions across Lebanon and Syria in recent days bear the hallmark of a sinister dystopian nightmare, using hidden explosive devices concealed within everyday telecommunications devices to wage deadly attacks on such a scale is unprecedented. That from Aya Mahjoub, Amnesty International Deputy Director for Middle East and North Africa. He took his pager in his hands. I was looking at it and it said error. I turned around to get my cigarettes and I was still right next to him, and then the pager exploded. He lost his hand and both his eyes. Mechanic in Tyre, Lebanon, describing how a friend's pager started beeping. Some of the patients, we had to remove both eyes. It kills me. In my past 20 years of practice, I have never removed as many eyes as I did yesterday. Ophthalmologist, Mount Lebanon University Hospital. Everybody had injuries to their hands, lots of amputations, and eye problems that are non-salvageable. One of those who died was an 11-year-old boy. He had major brain injuries. He was with his father, who had a pager. Georgia's Ghanem, Lebanese American University Medical Center. A group of 20 UN human rights experts on September 19th condemned the malicious manipulation of thousands of electronic pagers and radios to explode simultaneously across Lebanon and Syria as terrifying violations of international law. Of course, international law is considered a joke by the brutes who run governments. All that was gained in realizing that the horrors of World War II needed to be combated by serious international rules has been thrown out the windows. We're back to the war of all against all. Fatima was in the kitchen on Tuesday when a pager on the table began to beep, her aunt said. She picked up the device to bring it to her father and was holding it when it exploded, mangling her face and leaving the room covered with blood. Fatima was taking courses in English, Mrs. Moussawi said. She loved English. Now, of course, Zionists think these attacks were ingenious. They believe that the only people killed and maimed were terrorists. The people all over Lebanon are terrified of using a wide range of electronics and other devices. Doesn't matter. Here's a question. What if one of those devices had exploded on an airplane in flight? Could it have crashed a plane and killed hundreds of people from the plane and on the ground? What does the Israeli attack mean for all kinds of electronic devices and air travel? If a pager can be rigged, why not a cell phone or a computer? Will all electronics be banned from airplanes because of the glorious Israeli Mossad attack? I'm not going to show the video, but I've seen it. 4 Palestinians thrown off a several-story roof in a West Bank town near Jenin during an Israeli operation. It's unclear if these were bodies of people killed in a raid or just victims hurled to their death. This is the headline from the Washington Post. In the article it says, an Israeli official says this doesn't measure up to IDF values, and there will be an investigation. In Israeli speak, this means a web of delay, cover-up, minimization, and in rare instances, a slap on the hand. Months ago, we covered the persecution of Israeli teacher Meir Baruchen because he wrote some social media post sympathetic to Palestinians. Now there's another case, a teacher named Ofer Shor. This from Haaretz. Do note that he didn't make any of these. The Education Ministry summoned last week a middle school teacher for questioning after he posted a video in which he spoke out in favor of soldiers who refused to serve in the West Bank and condemned the current fighting in Gaza. He was summoned on the grounds that his statements could hurt the feeling of students, teachers, and the general public. Imagine he could hurt the feelings of children of soldiers who were taking part in a genocide. How sad. Do note that he didn't make any of these statements in class or refer to himself as a teacher. These were private statements. Shor has been taken out of class and spends his time in the break room. And now a few minutes from Democracy Now! With a genocide expert who studies what has happened in Burma and in Gaza.
This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
The United Nations is warning Burma is pluming the depths of a human rights abyss as the military regime intensifies the killings and arbitrary arrests of tens of thousands of civilians since seizing power in a coup over 3 years ago. The gruesome findings are part of a new UN human rights report detailing how the Burmese military detained children who were taken from their parents. Dozens of those children have died in custody. We end today's show with Maung Zarni, a Burmese genocide scholar and human rights activist who's been a vocal critic of the Burmese junta and Israel's war on Gaza and the Israeli occupation.
In August, Maung Zarni traveled to the occupied West Bank and the Gaza border.
Here at this Rafah crossing, sandwiched between Israel and Egyptian border, I feel like I am standing outside a giant concentration camp. When I see the tanks coming in and out, hearing airstrikes, I feel like I am once again visiting Auschwitz.
Maung Zarni, Burmese genocide scholar and human rights activist, joins us now from Kent, England, co-founder of the Forces of Renewal for Southeast Asia, or FORSI. Welcome back, Zarni, to Democracy Now! It's so important to have you with us. Talk about the groups you traveled to the Gaza border and to the West Bank with, and your thoughts, not only about what's happening there, but comparisons to what's going on, the horror that's going on in Burma right now.
Well, Amy, I am greatly indebted to the North American-based, particularly the U.S.-based rabbis for ceasefire and Christians for ceasefire, as well as the Jerusalem-based liberation theologian group called Sabeel. And these three organizations facilitated a visit of the 28-member delegation. And most of the delegates are, clergymen, clergywomen, and people of faith. And I'm, rather a humanist, human rights activist. But nonetheless, I joined them because I wanted to bear witness to what's happening. As you know, you have, covered my own native country of Burma for 30 years since we have known each other, and Burma and Israel. Burma regained independence in 1948. Israel established itself as a sovereign state in 1948. They had what Golda Meir called a love affair. And these two newly independent states, after the Second World War, are now undergoing the genocide trial or proceedings at the International Court of Justice. And so, Burma is no stranger when it comes to mass atrocities. What I found in Israel actually shocked me more than what I was prepared. I've studied genocide for decades, and I've studied Nazi genocide, Cambodian genocide, my own country's so-called Buddhist genocide of Rohingya people in Western Burma. But Israel has taken, the practices and policies of genocides to a whole new level.
Senator Bernie Sanders says he will sponsor a special type of resolution that has to be considered almost immediately by the Senate and, if passed, would stop weapons deliveries to Israel. The measure is being proposed as a joint resolution of disapproval of the arms sales, which is a mechanism that allows Congress to have oversight of foreign affairs. I'll play parts of one of his recent speeches. We don't agree with his categorization of the events of October 7th or his notion of Israel's right of self-defense. But what's important at this point is that he's trying to rally Congress to oppose weapon sales to the genocidal government of Israel.
In a few weeks' time, we will mark the one-year anniversary of the war in the Middle East. It has been almost 1 year since Hamas's horrific terrorist rampage on October 7th, which killed 1,200 innocent Israelis and took hundreds of hostages, including Americans. And as I have said many times, Israel had an absolute right to defend itself and respond to the Hamas attack. But tragically, Prime Minister Netanyahu's extremist government has not simply waged war against Hamas. It has waged all-out war against the Palestinian people. Israel has conducted this war with little regard for innocent civilians, bombing indiscriminately, and severely restricting the humanitarian relief operation needed by desperate people. After nearly 1 year of this carnage, out of a population of some 2.2 million people, more than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed and nearly 95,000 injured, 60% of whom are women, children, or elderly people. Yet those are the Netanyahu extremist government policies that these sales would reward. And I say that to my colleagues. All of this is going on. And should our response to Mr. Netanyahu say, keep it up, here are more arms, here are more money? A government that has caused mass civilian deaths, flouted U.S. and international law, and that is actively undermining key U.S. policies, goals in the region, should not be receiving more financial aid from America and should not be receiving military weaponry from the United States. Madam President, passing a joint resolution to block these sales will make clear to the Netanyahu government that they cannot continue to ignore the U.S. government's demands for an immediate ceasefire and the release of the hostages. It will put pressure on its extremist government to change Israel's military approach and avert a regional war. And it may, just may, begin to restore a shred of U.S. credibility abroad. Madam President, passing a joint resolution of disapproval is not only the right thing to do, it is not only the legal and appropriate thing to do, it is also what the American people want us to do. According to a June 5th poll from CBS News, 61% of Americans oppose sending weapons and supplies to Israel, including 77% of Democrats, 62% of independents, and many Republicans as well. And that poll is consistent with earlier polls. President, this is not a new or radical idea. The United States routinely conditions military aid, arms sales, and security cooperation with every other country. This ain't new. We have done it over and over again. And we have done it many times before with Israel. Not a new idea. It is only in recent years that the idea of leveraging aid to Israel to secure policy changes has become controversial. President Ronald Reagan, I say to my Republican colleagues, suspended delivery of F-16 fighter jets to Israel over its raid on the Ozark reactor in Iraq, threatened to suspend military aid to end Israel's bombardment of Beirut, and again threatened to stop military aid to force an Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon in 1982. That was President Ronald Reagan. President Jimmy Carter similarly leveraged aid to change Israeli policies in Lebanon. In 1991, then Secretary of State James Baker threatened to withhold $10 billion in loan guarantees unless Israel stopped settlement expansion. In other words, using arms sales and military aid as leverage is not a new idea done under Republican presidents, Democratic presidents. There is also recent precedent of Congress acting to stop the indiscriminate bombing of civilians. In 2019, Congress passed a series of JRDs to block arms sales to Saudi Arabia over its bombing campaign in Yemen. At that point, the Saudi coalition was directly responsible for roughly 8,000 civilian deaths over 4 years, mostly from airstrikes. Israel has killed 41,000 in less than a year. Madam President, blocking these sales would also be in keeping with actions taken by the international community and some of our closest allies. So what I'm suggesting here is not unique in the world, taking place all over the world, including some of our closest allies. There has been widespread condemnation of Israel's conduct during this war from governments around the world, international institutions, and humanitarian organizations. The United Kingdom recently suspended 30 export licenses for a range of armaments after concluding there was an unacceptable risk they could be used in violation of international humanitarian law. Germany has not approved an offensive weapon transfer since March. Italy, Spain, Canada, Belgium, and the Netherlands have taken similar steps. United Nations bodies have called for an end to the arms shipments fueling the conflict. Madam President, we cannot continue to ignore what the extremist Netanyahu government is doing in Gaza. We cannot continue to be complicit in this humanitarian disaster. The time is long overdue for the U.S. Senate to act, and we must act. I hope my colleagues will support this effort on the floor, and my office is ready to answer any questions that senators may have. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Now to a video from B'Tselem.
תגיד עוד פעם?
שטח צבאי סגור. אני הבוס, שמעת? אני בעל הבית.
אתם כאן פולשים לשטח שלי, יש לי פה, זה אדמות מדינה כאן, ויש לי פה עליהם חוזה. אנא בכיר. שיבוא המשטרה, אני יודע בדיוק מה היה פה. בדיוק מה היה פה ומה לא.
תקשיב, אנחנו גם צילמנו את זה, אמרתי. כן, אתם...
שימי עין שהם לא בונים פה,
מה שהיה אז, לא טוב. מה שחדש אסור. אסור לעשות את זה. זה אסור בדיוק. אין, זה אסור.
Dave Lippman reports on a demonstration against sale of seized Palestinian land, a sale taking place in New Jersey.
Thievery behind those doors!
Thievery behind those doors!
Thievery behind those doors!
Thievery!
These people in that building selling land at the expense of blood of families, generations, and pretending like it's not happening.
Demand the cancellation of the illegal and reprehensible sale of stolen Palestinian land right here in our home in the state of New Jersey, right behind us.
You can sell what isn't yours. The whole world is watching this horrendous satanic crime, what is being done to the people of Gaza. And 76 years in occupied Palestine.
One of the earliest Zionists, he called himself Ahad Ha'am. His name was Asher Ginsburg, and he visited Palestine in 1891 to 1893, and he wrote his warnings about what was already taking place all those years ago in the 1890s.
Now to Ukraine and the hypocrisy of the U.S. government. While it makes a big show of pressuring European countries to cut off imports from Russia, its own record is not very good. For instance, U.S. import of Russian uranium hasn't ended. In fact, it's increased. The amount has tripled. This according to Novaya Gazeta Europe, which is a dissident Russian site. It has tripled between 2021 and 2023. Between them, the EU and the US spent 2.2 billion euros on Russian nuclear fuel cells last year, having spent just 800 million in 2021. In May, the U.S. became the first country to impose any form of a ban on Russian nuclear fuels, but even then it made room for workarounds, allowing companies to flout the ban if they could prove that no alternative source of enriched uranium was available. And they did. 15,000 people have signed onto the Promoting Enduring Peace petition calling for two things. Number one, a flat ban on Russian uranium imports, and two, the rapid phase-out of nuclear power plants. But these sensible wishes have been ignored. Then there's the case of India, whose leader, Modi, Biden had addressed Congress last year. While Europe is going without Russian oil, India is engorged with it. Look at this BBC chart. Until 2022, India bought almost no oil from Russia. But as of April 23, they imported 2 million barrels of oil a day. This year, Reuters news service reports that over 40% of India's oil imports came from Russia. That's almost half. All without any comment from the Biden administration. That's our program for today. See us next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for the Struggle Video News.